Om Jnana Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militang Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'd like to speak to you today based on Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 15, text 27. It's the chapter entitled The Pandavas Retire Timely. When I first read this chapter as a very young devotee, end of 1973, I read this. Actually, sometime midway 1973. It struck my heart very intensely, the departure of the Pandavas, which was preceded by Arjuna's reporting to Yudhisthira Maharaj about the departure of Krishna from the ordinary vision of this world. Arjuna was presenting his state of devastation. As you recall, Yudhisthira was very hesitant to inquire directly about what he had already ascertained by seeing so many ill omens. Yudhisthira took his time in presenting the direct question. Or are you looking so devastated because your dearest friend, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has departed from the ordinary vision of this world? Before Yudhisthira Maharaj got to that, he asked, could it be this? Could it be that? Have you neglected this? Have you not done that? He knew though, but it's culture to gradually approach a difficult subject matter. And as we know, His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj is the reservoir of culture. I've commented in previous discussions how His Holiness made Vaishnava culture look so easy. It just flowed like the waves in the ocean. He didn't have to make any kind of contrivance in his behavior, in his demeanor, in his reciprocation, in his dealings with devotees. Just like, well, we have a common English expression, just like a duck takes to water. Etiquette and culture flowed from him. And so reading again, just now this chapter in Srimad Bhagavatam, I could see the culture of Arjuna and the culture of Yudhisthira. Not that Arjuna finally comes back to Hastinapur after an inexplicable delay, and then Yudhisthira Maharaj simply says, what happened? Is it because Krishna's left? No, Yudhisthira Maharaj knows how to gently approach a difficult and sensitive subject matter. This is culture. And finally, Yudhisthira pops the question. I think your devastation can only be because of the departure of Krishna from this world. And Arjuna gives his answer to that. Before going to that answer, I'd like to point out what Mahaprabhu says in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita about Vaishnava etiquette. He says that etiquette is the jewel of the Vaishnava. I was explaining at our remembrance gathering in Auckland, New Zealand on Saturday that, yes, etiquette is a jewel of Vaishnav. Therefore, His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj is the jewel mine. It's just laden with jewels because his exemplary etiquette inspires devotees all over the world and will inspire devotees onward into the future. How to behave with finesse, how to behave with sensitivity, care, and how to reciprocate. You know, in Nectar of Instruction, Rupa Goswami gives the 6 loving exchanges, Dadati, Pratignati, giving gifts, receiving gifts, giving prasad, receiving prasad, and giving and receiving confidence, revealing your mind, in other words, about not just anything, but about things in relation to advancement in bhakti. Those reciprocations are what makes our heart satisfied in devotional dealings. I remember I was in Moscow. It must have been around the year 2000. And somehow or other, His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj tricked me into his cooking lunch for me. If I had known the full impact of what was going on, I probably wouldn't have agreed. But in his gentle, artful way, nonchalant, very casual, why don't you come for lunch tomorrow? I'll see about arranging a cook. It'll be very nice. I promise you, it'll be very nice. And so I came, and I was there with another devotee. I believe it was Bhakti Charu Goswami. And much to my astonishment, the cook was none other than His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. What a lunch. I remember 20 years later, such an exquisite lunch. Mm. Another memory is during a talk he and I gave at the TOVP site, the Temple of Vedic Planetarium. At that time, there was just a shell of the building. And so we were speaking on the ground floor. And many devotees had gathered there. So we both spoke a bit. And as we finished walking away, he said to me, you know, this sum of money to complete the TOVP, it's not very much at all. I was a bit taken aback about, he said it so casually. They need $65 million more dollars. Not a very big amount. I could see how he thought on a big scale. He was no small timer. Of course, Krishna appreciates any service, small time or big time. But Maharaj was definitely always having big plans. Not very much money. He looked at me, you agree? Not very much. That brings me to another special quality of His Holiness. He was so collegial, working fraternally, very harmoniously. like a good family member. Yet at the same time, he was very individualistic in doing a project. So this is a very special balance, how to be a good family member and at the same time doing what you need to do to serve the Father. Not that in the name of pleasing the Father, you don't do anything. You just say, I'm getting along with everyone, even though I don't do anything myself. No, he mastered the paradox, how to be a humble, harmonious person in Prabhupada's family of disciples, while at the same time being an individual who knew that he had a personal responsibility to expand Prabhupada's mission. As you may know, sometimes devotees go to one extreme or the other. They simply try to be harmonious and cooperative without endeavoring themselves. I'm just waiting for what everyone else does. That's cooperation. What is everyone else doing? I don't want to do anything because I don't want to get in the way of what anyone else is doing. No, that's one extreme. And the other extreme is to be so individualistic. In the USA, such types are called rugged individualists. It's my way or the highway. Everyone clear out of my path. I'm doing my thing. That's the other extreme. The balance is very important. And I've come to realize that the balance requires empowerment from Krishna. How to be such a cooperative, collegial family person, and at the same time be a Vaishnava individual. And His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj always struck me in that way. He's got the paradox down. When he felt that he needed to do something for Prabhupada, he was focused like a laser beam. All while at the same time being so friendly and kind and caring to others. I remember a situation in which he wanted to write a book about the lives of devotees, not the great Vaishnavas of the past, but contemporaries. So he knew my story of how I came to Prabhupada's lotus feet. I had gone to see him for lunch in Toronto. And we started talking after lunch. And he asked me how I took up the bhakti path. And so I told him, it's a long story and probably a very unique story. And after that, I remember well, before we get to that, when I finished my story in Toronto, he just spontaneously blurted out, now I believe anyone can become a devotee. So later, when I would see him in India, I would always remind him of that. You rightfully said after hearing my story that it's possible for anyone. If that guy can become a devotee, try to be a devotee. Anyone can. I didn't say that. He said, I didn't say that. Very tactful, very he tried to withdraw the statement, which he had spontaneously blurted out because he's the master of sensitivity and tact and Vaishnava etiquette. But of course, I was in no way feeling miffed or slighted by his saying that. I knew he's seeing the glory of Srila Prabhupada. that anyone, by Prabhupada's mercy, could become a devotee, even this rascal. So maybe a few years ago, he approached me about his book project. He wanted to write a book about Prabhupada's disciples that he had access to. He wanted to hear. He wanted to present their story. So he came to me, shocking me. So people don't know how you approach Prabhupada. They need to hear that. They need to get to know you. I said, oh no, they don't need to get to know me. They don't need to hear my story. But many of you know that when Maharaj wants something, he's very persistent in his very gentle, humble way. Very persistent. Now, bear in mind, I had already slipped away from Satyaraj, my godbrother Satyaraj, the writer. He had this idea before His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. He came to me, let me write your story. I've done it for Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. I'm doing it for Jaipataka Maharaj. Let me do it for you. No. And he persisted. And some other, after a couple of years, I actually gave him the slip. I actually, some other, slipped out of the situation. So keep that in mind when I explain that the next one was His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. And I was confident that he would desist just by hearing my story. But this went on. My point in telling this is not to emphasize in any way my miserable story, but to emphasize his love for devotees. He wanted to glorify devotees. He wanted to let the world see Prabhupada's mercy, and he wanted the world to know of Prabhupada's disciples. But I couldn't see my way to it. And Maharaj persisted, and it's very difficult to elude, to escape from his transcendental desire. I finally was talking to one godbrother in Mumbai, and I just started crying, like, I don't want anyone writing my story. My life without Prabhupada was a disaster. That's all I know. I used to, when Bhakti Charu Maharaj would ask me, when are we going to do the story for my book? I would always quote the verse by Sanatana Goswami in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Needs jati, needs sangi, patita adama. Ku vishaya kupe padi, goinainu janama. Needs jati, lowborn, needs sangi. All my associates were low class. Patita adama. I spent my whole life at the bottom of the well of sinful materialism. So I told that to His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. There's my life story. If Sanatana Goswami can say that, what to speak of me? But Maharaj didn't buy it. So it left me with no choice but to consult a godbrother that both of us respected and would listen to. And I just tearfully told this godbrother, I can't do this. I don't want anyone writing my story. So that godbrother, no doubt, communicated to His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. And the next time I saw Bhakti Charu Maharaj, he didn't mention it. He just smiled And I gave a sigh of relief. But again, my point is his love for devotees. He truly and genuinely wanted to glorify devotees. It's not that he just wanted to put another book out. Okay, I've done Ocean of Mercy. I need another literary idea, another literary project. No, that wasn't his motivation. His motivation was purely to glorify devotees, to make the world know the glories of Srila Prabhupada in terms of his followers. Another point that I often speak about the past week, and I began speaking about this to an audience of Bhakti Charu Maharaja's disciples in Sydney, Australia, and I enlarged upon it, speaking about it in New Zealand. The famous 2000 and I forgot what year it was that Tamal Krishna Maharaj suddenly left us. And I remember to this day, His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj's written deliberation on the situation. He seemingly accused Krishna. Krishna, don't you care about the Sankirtan movement on this planet? Don't you care anymore? Why are you taking this great Sankirtan general? We need him so much. Why have you done this? Don't you care? This is a pure presentation to Krishna. It reminded me of gopis apparently accusing Krishna when Akrura came to take Krishna and Balaram to Mathura. Providence, you're so cruel. You've taken our Of course, in that particular case, they're accusing Providence. Krishna to them is just a cowherd boy in Nara Leela, his human-like pastimes. Later, or actually earlier in Krishna Leela, you'll find them accusing Krishna because he left them before the start of the Rasa Leela. So my point is that we're probably unconsciously accusing Krishna right now, but we're not doing it in a pure way, probably. We're a bit angry that, Krishna, why have you done this to us? And there may be some traces of envy in us. Okay, Krishna, you have everything you need, but what about us? Why are you neglecting us? You're Bhagavan, unlimitedly full of the six opulences, Sadaishvarya Purna. But what about us? Why have you done this to us? Don't you know what you're doing? Do you see the devastation you've caused? So we can, in our heart, be angry and a little envious, probably subconsciously, because after all, we're devotees or aspiring devotees, and we don't consciously harbor grudges against Krishna. We don't consciously accuse Krishna. We can't say we're on the platform of the gopis whose accusations were all 100% Shuddha Sattva. all completely pure. So my point is that we could be harboring some resentment deep in the heart. And that resentment blocks our chanting. We don't want these hard lumps in the heart to develop. But they do if we harbor resentment, even unconsciously. Anger, envy. Why have you done this? Why have you done this? Don't you know what you're putting us through? So we need to make peace in our hearts that Krishna does know what he's doing. You've heard from so many other speakers about their reactions when Srila Prabhupada left this world. We were stunned. We were speechless. Most of us never expected it to happen. And we were confused. And as you know, the first 10 years or so after Prabhupada's disappearance were confusing times. But simultaneously, the Lord in the heart began to assert himself more. In other words, our vision began to perceive that Lord in the heart more. And mystically, because Bhakti Yoga is the height of mysticism, mystically, things in ISKCON began to steady. So similarly, amidst this shock of Maharaja's departure, there are tears, but gradually you'll notice a relationship that becomes more intense, more personal. I've been explaining in other places how Srila Prabhupada said that the vapu, the physical association, is for neophytes. I first read this comment when I was taking care of his correspondence in Los Angeles, both letters from him and to him. And I saw this statement: physical association with the Guru is for neophytes. And of course, our reaction, your reaction, like mine would be, okay, let's remain neophytes. We want that vapu, we want that physical association. That's natural. Take advantage of all you can get. But at the same time, it's true that the Vani is more important. And the amazing thing is that the Vani is even more intense. That's hard to appreciate at first because we miss that sweet physicalness of physical association. But we'll find that Krishna is not cheating us. Krishna is not depriving us. Actually, Krishna will give us more. And for the sincere disciple, he or she will feel their Guru's presence even more, although the Guru has physically departed. This is the mysticism of bhakti. So please let us remember that. The power of association through instruction is not mythology. It's not just some kind of encouraging words. It is the actual bhakti experience. So let's go back to Arjuna coping with the departure of Lord Krishna. How did he snap out of it? And how did he snap out of his depression and his devastation? He told Yudhishthira Maharaj, Desha Hirtapo Pashamani Cha Haranti Smaratas Chitam Govinda Vihitani Me. Translation: Now I am attracted to the instructions imparted to me now to God, because they are impregnated with instructions for relieving the burning heart in all circumstances of time and space. This is one of my favorite verses when I was a brand new devotee. The instructions are capable of relieving the burning heart in all circumstances of time and space. In this time of dejection and even desperation, we can focus more on Krishna's instructions, our spiritual master's instructions, and our hearts will be soothed and nourished and invigorated. We want to develop attraction to those instructions, just as Arjuna is talking about. He says, now I'm attracted to those instructions imparted to me by the personality of Godhead Govinda. So by your association with one another, you should increase that attraction for the body, for the instructions by your spiritual master. That's the purpose of genuine Vaishnava Sangha, to increase the attraction for the instructions of Guru and Krishna, and to advance in developing love of Krishna. But let's hear a little from the purport. Again, this is First Canto, Chapter 15, Text 27. Herein, Arjuna refers to the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita, which was imparted to him by the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. The Lord left behind him the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, not for the benefit of Arjuna alone, but also for all time and in all lands. The Bhagavad Gita, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the essence of all Vedic wisdom. It is nicely presented by the Lord himself for all who have very little time to go through the vast Vedic literatures, like the Upanishads, Puranas, and Vedanta Sutras. It is put within the study of the great historical epic Mahabharata, which was especially prepared for the less intelligent class, namely the women, the laborers, and those who are worthless descendants of the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and higher sections of the Vaishyas. The problem which arose in the heart of Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra was solved by the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Again, after the departure of the Lord from the vision of earthly people, when Arjuna was face to face with being vanquished in his acquired power and prominence, he wanted again to remember the great teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, just to teach all concerned that the Bhagavad Gita can be consulted in all critical times, not only for solace from all kinds of mental agonies, but also for the way out of great entanglements which may embarrass one in some critical hour. So this is very important for us. Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita can be consulted in all critical times. It doesn't matter which century you're living in. It doesn't matter which part of the world you live in. The universality of bhakti, the universality of bhakti mysticism applies to you and your situation. Twice Arjuna has gone through this. The first time is the battle of Kurukshetra. You know about his devastation in chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita, which is sometimes entitled the Yoga of Despair. So that was the first time. And then the second time is what we're talking about now. His dearest friend, Krishna, has disappeared from the worldly vision. He comments in the verse before this that the material world is a place of competition, the weaker and the stronger. The weaker are gobbled up by the stronger, and that's just the way the world is. In the purport, Prabhupada explains how, because conditioned souls want to lord it over material nature, the Lord arranges that there are different gradations of physical power, intellectual power, so that there's always a disparity, there's always a inequality. And that inequality and disparity gives the conditioned soul a chance to lord it over someone, somehow, something, some way. And so that disparity, this one's stronger, that one's weaker, this one's smarter, that one's not as smart, that creates strife and competition. And therefore there's struggle. And so living entities, due to this struggle for existence, are constantly coming and going, appearing and disappearing. Just like the material world itself, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Bhutta Bhutta Paliyate. The material world is created and annihilated again and again. So if we know the bhakti knowledge, we accept that this is a world of appearances and disappearances. And those appearances and disappearances are caused by a disparity in the strength and power of the various living entities. They want to lord it over. You can only lord it over if someone's weaker than you. So therefore, to fulfill your desire to lord it over, the Lord arranges that there are some weaker persons. You can lord it over them. And meanwhile, because you're not as strong as someone else, that someone else is lording it over you. This is all due to the desire to be the supreme enjoyer. In this world of appearances and disappearances, the coming and going of a Vaishnava is completely something else. Just like the coming and going of Krishna is completely something else, so it is about the comings and goings of a Vaishnava. There's no question of a Vaishnava's coming or leaving because of disparity in the laws of nature. And that disparity, as we point out, creates strife. Strife means someone is stronger, someone is weaker. But the coming and going of a Vaishnava has nothing to do with that. It's simply about the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By Arjuna's remembrance of the instructions given by Govinda, he says all the trash in his mind subsided. It was cleansed. This is the power of the Vani. So please, as the months and years go by, take deeper shelter of that Vani, of your spiritual master, and you'll find the personal relationship deepens so mystically. So I'd like to see if there are any questions now. I see something in the chat. I'll start at the top.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. There is one comment and one question. So I'll just read out the comment.
Someone is saying they think it would be very good if I would actually allow my story to be included in Bhakti Charu Maharaja's book. I appreciate that statement, but at the same time, I'd like to ask you to please appreciate that devotees don't like to be in situations in which they're glorified. Here's a question. The head knows that Vani takes precedence over Vapu. How do we make the heart accept that? Act on that instruction and the heart will follow, especially as the heart gains in realization, as the heart gains in experience. Bhakti is not theory or doctrine. It is about instructions that produce experience. We're just in the midst of this great experience of impact. So we need to give ourselves some time to sort ourselves out. And for the sincere followers, they'll notice what Prabhupada's disciples noticed, that in time, you feel that presence more and more. Krishna is not neglecting anyone. Krishna is not depriving anyone. We just need to give Krishna a chance to show that the tattva about Vani and Vapu is true. It'll be verified by your experiences. So someone is asking, if Krishna was pacified, if Arjuna was pacified when Krishna left, then why did Pandavas left the world on Krishna's departure? The Pandavas left this world because it's the desire of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to accompany him to their next place of pastimes as Krishna's Leela goes from one universe to another. They're simply the servants of Krishna. Just like Arjuna was bewildered by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that Krishna could teach us through Arjuna's example. So Arjuna did that service of becoming bewildered. Everything the Pandavas did is because of fulfilling Krishna's desire. Great souls know when Krishna wants them to move to another service in another place. Next question. Can you tell us if you had any intimate association of Srila Prabhupada, Vapu? And if not, how did you go deep into Srila Prabhupada Vani and feel intimate with Srila Prabhupada? Well, to tell you the truth, and you might be shocked to hear it, and I wonder if this happened to you with your spiritual master, what would you do? I only received not one word from Srila Prabhupada, but just a sound. A sound that I can't imitate. He was touring the BBT in 1975 during the famous Chaitanya Charitamrita marathon. And he came into my office, and this is the first time we were physically face to face. And he had never spoken to me before. I never had the chance. By that time, Prabhupada had thousands of disciples. So I was looking at his feet because I had read in Bhagavatam that that's how you greet a saintly person. You first look at the feet and then raise your vision slowly. So as I raised my vision, I noticed he was looking me over with his Vaikuntha eyes. He looked me over and then simply said, "Hmm." And that was it. It's the only sound that during Prabhupada's physical presence, that's the only sound I ever got from him, for me. Now, what would you have done if that's all that you received from your guru? Would you have been able to continue? Because I'm sure that for so many of you, during the physical presence of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj, you had more than just one sound. But actually, to tell you the truth, after Srila Prabhupada's physical departure, I felt closer. And I felt his presence even more intensely, much more intensely, and much more, let me put it this way, he lavished me. How to bring that about? Someone's asking, how did you go deep into his Vani and feel intimate with him? By acting on his instruction to preach. Mahaprabhu has ordered, wherever you go, whomever you meet, teach the science of Krishna. And in particular, I went to a dangerous part of the world to pursue Prabhupada's mercy. Another question? At the time of initiating me, His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj stated to me to let this relationship now grow in the heart, even when he was present in his Vapu form. We cannot, however, see this aspect, nor can we realize this so profoundly. We somehow want Guru Maharaj to reciprocate with us, answer our prayers and plea. So kindly advise us, how shall we reconcile that? And will we hear from our Gurudev in our hearts? Of course. If you are so dedicated to carrying out his instruction and following its example, you will receive your heart's desire. According to his schedule, not your schedule. Definitely. You'll feel the reciprocation in time, but you have to act on those instructions. Dedicate yourself to do that, and then you'll feel the reciprocation in your heart. You'll hear the reciprocation. You'll see the reciprocation. Someone's asking about sharing some of the dealings I had with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. I did that. And especially, this question is making me remember what I told you about his conversation to me at the TOBP. But the money they're trying to raise is not very much. He was always thinking big on behalf of Srila Prabhupada. And so we expect that his disciples will perpetuate the famous Bhakti Charu Maharaj culture, etiquette, gentleness, as well as thinking how to do big plans for Srila Prabhupada's pleasure. So I thank you very much for your kind attention, and thank you for this opportunity to glorify His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. This coming decade, between 2020 and 2030, as one of my godbrothers, Burijan Prabhu, has said, this will be the decade of tears because so many of us Prabhupada disciples will be departing. So you all are the pioneers for this decade. You're inaugurating what is going to become a constant companion throughout this decade. And so by your properly handling this event, you'll be able to comfort others. So again, I thank you. Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.